Hey, and welcome. In this mini-series, I'm exploring the curious, interesting, and sometimes downright obscene spots in Grand Theft Auto 3's Liberty City. The first video in this series took a look at Portland, but now it's time for us to take a look at Staunton Island. And just to acknowledge it, I know that a lot of Americans call this Staunton Island, but given that I've always called it Staunton Island, and everyone I know has called it Staunton Island, that's what I'm going to refer to it as for the rest of these video series. This is the second island that you make your way to in Grand Theft Auto 3. It's an interesting space because for the first few hours of the game, it's sat right there, just across the water from you. Out of your reach, you're never able to actually get there. And yet, when you arrive there, there's plenty for the player to dive into and explore. And the first space that I want to show you is when you come off the bridge. When you turn left, there are a row of shops that you can see. Most of them have nothing inside. However, you can actually go inside some of these buildings, and these locations, the interiors of Grand Theft Auto 3, fascinate me so greatly. There are so few interior locations within the game, and so when you actually bump into one like at the Leone mansion, it's really cool to see. This is such an interesting area because you don't really get many spaces that are this clean and this concise within GTA 3. Now, of course, the reason I think that they've put this here is because they want to give the player an interesting space to drive through if they want to go from one lane to the other. This to me is literally just window dressing, and it's fascinating to me though that they've gone all the way to making all of this custom stuff that you don't really see anywhere else in the game. There's, to my knowledge, there is no other computer areas like this which are this color or this kind of interesting to observe. But it's not the only interior in this area. A few doors down you can actually go inside another area, and when you go inside this one, it's very bare bones. Now, I'm not quite sure why they gave so much attention to the other one, which was the computer cafe, but at the same time create this area here that is completely empty. It really does feel like someone made this and then they just didn't come back to put anything in here. It feels like a car showroom or something like that. It's really odd to me that they've made this area just feel so completely blank and lifeless, while the other area had people spawning in there. It had all of those custom assets. It's really fascinating to me that they didn't just think to put like a cafe here or something. Who knows why they chose to do this. The next spot that I want to highlight to you is actually Kenji's casino. This is at the end of the island. It's a pretty big building and you actually come here for some missions, but you don't really explore the space when you're doing that. You basically just go to the ground floor and the mission starts and then you move on. I've always found this space to be really fascinating though, because there's just so many levels and so many different interconnected pathways that take you all the way around. I also find it really fascinating that they used a helicopter model here. Obviously in Grand Theft Auto 3 you cannot use helicopters, but the fact that they put this here tries to add to the story that's being told in this area. The fact is that this is a helipad and it's supposed to make it feel like this is being used on a daily basis by the people that own this place. But yeah, you can't jump into this. You don't really see too many of these lying around, and even rarer to see them outside of the airport. But if we go back to the stairway here, you can see that there's a bunch of different areas that you can actually walk across to. It doesn't need to be here. All of this is really pointless because there's nothing actually in this area. And you can even see at the top the area where some of the cutscenes play out. But I guess they really wanted to make this space feel like it was a lot bigger than it actually is. You can't actually go inside the casino, which is a bit of a shame, but this space is towered over by all of these large buildings, and so it feels really interesting that you're allowed to sort of go to the rooftops here, have a look around, and explore a lot of the gantries and walkways, which, like I said, they just didn't need to be here. It feels like this is a more realised space than the game really wants you to think about. I also kind of love how in Grand Theft Auto 3 they create these illusions of interior spaces like this, even though you can't actually go inside. I really would have loved to have seen Grand Theft Auto 3 offer like a casino area of some kind, but I guess we were still a bit of a ways off from that. I think San Andreas is the first time that they actually do a casino in the Grand Theft Auto games. But I just find this space really, really interesting and oddly intricate compared to a lot of the exterior spots in Grand Theft Auto 3. The next spot here is just down the road, and it's the entire area under the Callahan Bridge, but on this side. In the Portland video, I talked about how the area around the Callahan Bridge over there seemed to be interestingly utilized. There's a little park space, there's a basketball court, and then you've got the diner just over the way there. Whereas on this side, it's all warehouses and these little sort of jetties for boats to dock up against. And yeah, I don't understand why they put all this detail in here, because to my knowledge, you don't ever actually come down here for a mission. You do use the jetties and the piers there sometimes, but you don't actually come round here and explore this space. You have to come here on your own terms to do this. I know in Liberty City Stories there's a mission that brings you down here, but I'm pretty confident that this is a completely optional area, and I guarantee that like 95% of players have never wandered down here to observe these lorries and also to see that there's a police badge there. Very, very curious. There's a lot of detail here for a space that a lot of players will never ever come to. And like I said, it's not just the fact that this is here. This exists underneath the main road, so you've likely driven over this place hundreds of times and never given a thought to what's underneath it. But the fact is, this exists, and it's really, really cool. It's such a quiet spot as well. It just feels like nothing really goes on here out of the ordinary. Yet at the same time, it really feels like a lot of shady dealings could be done here. It feels like this is the place you would come to if you didn't want to be observed by the wider city. You can see that there's a jump here for the cars if you really want to bring a car down here. But again, like I said, you're never pushed in this direction, and you can see there's little spaces that allow you to walk around, so you're never actually truly trapped here. This is one of those spaces that really makes me love Grand Theft Auto 3's world design. None of this was necessary. In other open world games around this time, this would have simply been sealed off, the player would never have been allowed to come into this area, and yet here this is. It's all here, and there's things for the player to do, to run up, to explore. It really helps to build the world of Liberty City, and it makes it feel like this entire area exists outside of the scope of the game. Like when you're not here, there are people here bustling around, moving around these cargo holds, and everything here is just existing not just for you, but because it wants to tell the story of, yes, these are docklands and these are where people are moving goods in and out of the city who don't want to go all the way over to Portland. And like I said, the fact that it's underneath the Callahan Bridge, which you pass over so many times, it's right next to Asuka's home as well. So again, it's not even like this is far out of the way. Players who stumble upon this can explore it and just have a fun time just taking in the atmosphere and the ambience of the distant vehicles and the people talking as they walk past. I just love this space. The next area I'm going to take you to is actually in the construction site. If you've played all the way through Grand Theft Auto 3, you will remember that you end up coming to these construction sites to get a bunch of missions. However, a lot of those missions take place in the southern part of the construction site. This area is huge, it's vast, and there's actually a second construction site that's sort of attached to it via a little bridge that goes underneath the road. If you explore this space, you'll come to realize that this is very, very, very large. This is that bridge that I was sort of talking about. The tunnel underneath lets you go over to where you can get the missions, and it's also where you fight all the Colombians when you storm the construction site. But what's curious is that underneath this tunnel, the second area, there's not much really going on, and yet there's a lot of detail that's been added into this space to really sort of tell the story that something really bad happened here. Now, as you explore this space, you can kind of see the framework for what is going to be a future building, but you can also see the ruins of what was here before. Now, if you played Liberty City Stories, you'll know that this entire area basically gets blown up from underneath, and you can kind of see the wreckage of that as you're exploring the areas here. There's walls, there's a pipe here that goes underneath the ground. Like, there was no need to put all this in. But all of this tells the story of this space being incredibly chaotic, being very, very unwelcoming for the player. It just makes you curious what is actually going on here. And I just love the attention to detail in trying to make this space feel like nothing really interesting is going on here. And outside of the van over there, and I think maybe a hidden package somewhere in here, you really don't end up coming here for any purpose. This space is purely here to add to the aura of Liberty City, and because it takes up such a large amount of the island on Staunton Island, you really can't miss it. But then, like I said, a lot of players will never stop to actually come in here because to them, all of this doesn't really mean anything. There's no story justification for coming here. I just really think it's cool that they committed so much space of the map to an area like this. But speaking of large footprints, I have to talk about the stadium. In the northern part of Staunton Island, there's a very large stadium, and I would make the argument that other than the airport, this has the largest single footprint of any building in Liberty City. Now, what's crazy about this structure is that you can't actually get inside it. You never come here for a mission. There's no story cutscene that takes place in this area, and unless you are able to use the dodo to fly in, you can't actually get inside. You basically only ever see this structure from the outside space, and for a lot of players, you'll drive around it and it just kind of becomes part of the world. And one of the reasons I think that they chose to do this is because there really isn't a need for there to be a sports team in Grand Theft Auto 3. The game never really goes in that direction. But the fact that this is here makes it feel like the people of Liberty City have like a sports team that they celebrate. You can imagine this space just filled with fans coming out excited or disappointed at the result of the game. And because there's so much green space around it, it really does feed into the vibe that this is a considered area. It really feels like the people of Liberty City are in awe of this stadium. It's such a grand structure, and because it's so big, you can basically see it from across Portland. You can see it when you look back from Shoreside Vale. It's hard to miss this monolithic structure that you are never invited into. As a kid, I always wondered why they didn't just set the final mission of this game in the stadium, because to me, it always felt like such a mystery. Why is this here? Why did the developers put so much footprint into what is basically just a giant piece of eye candy? And it baffles me, it confuses me, but I'm also, like I said with the last space, just in awe of the fact that the team at DMA was so convinced by the idea of letting Liberty City tell its own story. You look at this and you understand that this is a beating heart of the city. It's a key part of the skyline and the structure of Liberty City itself. And like I said, you can use a dodo to fly in there. I suspect one of the reasons that they have mapped out the inside of this area, it does say some fun things in the stands, is because they wanted people to try and get inside this. I think this is very much been placed here to capture that sense of intrigue, and it gives players something to aim for. I'm going to get inside this space no matter how hard you try to keep me out of it. But the funniest thing is the next space I'm going to talk to you about is actually in the shadow of the stadium. It actually basically goes around it. If you wander out to the outside bit, you'll find this pathway here. And this path is so different to everything else on Staunton Island. It doesn't feel like it belongs here. It feels like it's a different space entirely. And as you make your way down here, it's very calm. It's very peaceful. It's not busy like the city centre area. It's got these little piers that strut out into the water, and you can hear the distant bells of the bridge as it raises and falls. You can also really look into Shoreside Vale. If you are playing through the game, this is probably the closest you'll be able to get to that island and take a decent look at it before you're actually able to drive over there towards the end of the game. But as you make your way back onto the pathway here, it just sort of keeps going. GTA 3, to my knowledge, never brings you out in this direction. The game doesn't really bring you to this area of the map to do things. A lot of the missions take place either in the main city part or north of the city where Donald Loves is located. But down here, it's just here for existing purposes. And this is one of the things that Liberty City really achieves that a lot of open worlds from this time just failed miserably at, in my opinion. There's a sense of intrigue to exploring these spaces. They are carefully crafted and very well executed. I love the lamps here. I love the fact that there's a little wall that stops you just walking out into the water. It feels considered. It feels like it's been placed here for a purpose. And look how close we are to Shoreside Vale here. We literally feel like we can jump right over there. And if you've never been there and you really want to explore it, this is the most teasing and tantalizing of teases that they could put forward to you, because you can literally see the roads over there. You can see the details on the buildings. It's amazing how they want you to take in the world, and it makes it feel so much richer because all of that just feels just out of your reach, and it makes you want to play through the game more just to get over there. But the pathway just keeps going. And when I say that it's probably one of the longest unbroken pathways in all of Grand Theft Auto 3, I'm not lying. All of this has been crafted to help the player feel immersed in this world. And all of this just feels like it doesn't really belong in Grand Theft Auto 3. It's very well put together. And the aura and atmosphere here just feels completely unique to this space. Staunton Island is a busy area filled with neon lights and tightly knit together buildings with roads that sort of cut between and alleyways that you kind of have to learn to navigate. Yet, look at this space here. It's quiet, it's tranquil, it's filled with just people going about their days. There's a huge rock face here that basically makes you feel like you're on a different plane of existence from the rest of the island. You feel a million miles away from all the things I just described, yet you're not. You're literally like a minute's drive away. It's crazy to me that they put this kind of detail in. And obviously, as we're making our way through this space, we end up circling back around that stadium that I was talking about earlier on. I find it fascinating that they put the stadium there, which you don't really visit, and then they put this around the stadium, which you don't really visit either. The next space is actually at the end of that pathway, but we're going to need to grab a car if we want to have a proper look at it. So this is one of those areas where I don't understand why they put this in the game to begin with, because not only do they not really want you heading down this direction, but they actively put nothing out here to stop you from ever really wanting to explore this space. In order to get out here, you literally have to jump on the wall and then head down. And from the way this is designed, I get the feeling that the developers of this game didn't really think anyone was ever going to actually come out this way. And you can see there's a massive pipeline that runs across the water there, and it sort of acts as a physical connection to the mainland. I'm guessing that it's for gas or electricity, piping, whatever, but there's a massive invisible wall that stops you from jumping on top of it and walking across. But when you come to this space, there's no NPCs, there's no vehicles, there's just nothing. This space exists purely to add something to the bottom of this island and to act as a physical bridge to the rest of the world. But at the same time, it's here, and as we explore it more, you'll maybe come to realize that I don't think the developers even wanted you to acknowledge this place's existence, because as we kind of go up here, you can see that there's no textures on some of these back walls. Some of the finer details just don't exist here. And what's curious is that in GTA Liberty City stories, this entire area is kind of repurposed for the ferry port, so you end up coming down here a lot. But in Grand Theft Auto 3, unless you come to the armory there and buy your rocket launcher and such, you don't ever actually come to the waterfront here, and so this space is pretty alien to a lot of people who are playing this game. I'm actually surprised there's collision on this area, because something that unfinished in GTA 3 usually indicates that the area beneath you is about to give way. And yeah, like, I'd love to know what you think this space is for, because it's always baffled and confused me. But if we go all the way to the southern tip of the island, there's another area that doesn't ever really do anything. I think there's a hidden package here, but there's this broken pier head, which when you drive down here, there's literally nothing here but this pier. And again, in Liberty City Stories, I think there's actually a mission that brings you here. But in GTA 3, you end up going so far out into the water that it just tells you you're in Liberty City. This feels like the edge of the world here. And I'm not even sure why there's a pier here that is broken. When you come back to the land, there's a shotgun down at the end, which in my opinion is, at this point in the game, you wouldn't really be that interested in. And then there's a few rocks that have been thrown in here, I guess just to kind of show that the cliffs can give way, maybe, who knows. But other than that, there's just nothing of note around this space, and yet it exists. It's one of the points that you actually get to sort of wander out into the water more than you normally would. It just kind of feels like it's here to showcase that there are spots and spaces in Liberty City that exist for the seedy underbelly, that just exist when you're not looking at it. Again, it's just another quiet detail that adds to the mystery around Liberty City and makes you wonder what is going on when you're not paying attention to these spaces. If you've played Liberty City Stories, you'll recognise this cathedral immediately because you end up coming here for a bunch of missions. But in GTA 3, it just kind of sits here in the heart of the city district, and I assume it's just been placed here because it adds a lot of variety to the area. You've got all these neon signs, these huge tall buildings, and then right next to them you've got this huge cathedral that spans this massive area, and yet you can't go inside it, you can't really do much in it. There are a few items dotted around here and there, but really it just kind of serves as this sort of grand marker which the player, I assume, uses when they're driving past to sort of remember, oh, well, it's right next to the cathedral. It's basically a landmark that the player can remember. But what's also curious to me is that you can't even walk all the way around it. When you try to do so, you bump into walls and things that try to stop you. So a lot of these spaces, I guarantee players may have visited once and then they don't come back to, because why on earth would you come back to this area? There's nothing of interest here. But I wasn't joking when I said that this space is literally in the heart of Staunton Island. Literally, you walk here and there's a big burger joint right next to it. There's shops, there's neon signs. You're basically in the Times Square version of Liberty City here. So this cathedral isn't like out of the way, it's in the heart of the city. There's even a giant movie theatre here. Again, love the ambience of Staunton Island as you're making your way through. But perhaps the most interesting part of all of this is if you wander into this little hole here, you will spot a graveyard. Yes, for some reason, the developers decided that the game needed a graveyard, and so they've put a bunch of tombstones here. It leads to a dead end. It doesn't really have anything interesting going on in here, and I think there's a hidden package in here, but really this serves nothing to the story. You're never directed to come here by the game, and it's just really creepy. I have to be honest with you. The fact that this is right next to all of that stuff that we just talked about, it's such a contrast in the scale and the theme of these spaces. This doesn't feel like it belongs on this island. This feels like something you would find on Shoreside Vale. But here it is. It's a cemetery. People are lying in the ground right next to all of that city that's right next to it. It's kind of crazy when you think about it, but I also kind of just love the audacity of the contrast that's going on here, and the fact as well that you can kind of walk up the waterfront here and see yet another entrance into the cathedral. It's such a fascinating building in terms of Grand Theft Auto 3 and just how much it adds to the world without actually doing anything or being used for any set purpose. I also wanted to quickly point out this space here. This is kind of at the foot of one of the large buildings near the entrance to the island, but I just kind of love the reflective pool here, the fact that it's like this little park area that's tucked away in the middle of the island. You can hear the cars going around the outside, and yet it's all here to sort of act as a bit of set dressing so that everything doesn't look so grey as you're exploring this space. I really enjoy when the developers just throw a bit of a curveball into these areas, because this feels like a world away to what's going on the other side of the wall over there. And sometimes I just used to like coming and standing here because it feels really interesting that they place such a detailed area like this next to buildings that, well, you can't really access, and there's nothing else really interesting going on around this space. The final spot that I really want to show you is up north of the park. I don't really want to cover the park in this video because the park, well, I mean, everyone goes into the park and some missions take you into there. But I just want to talk about this area here. Number one, the fact that this pathway just kind of ends before it even gets near the roadway over here. I'm not quite sure why they couldn't just be bothered to put the pathway round like that, but that's not the main reason that we are here. I want to talk to you about these alleyways that sort of line these buildings behind the ammunition. In GTA 3, a lot of care and attention has been placed into making places feel like they exist within a livable world. However, in these alleyways here, I don't get the feeling that the developers were so in love with this space. When you kind of come in from the road, you can see the windows, and I assume they put details like the windows here because when you're driving past, they want people to see the windows. But when you actually wander inside here, they stopped kind of putting details onto the walls. Instead, everything just kind of becomes this grey texture, this like concrete jungle, and it kind of goes on for a lot longer than you expect, and it sort of snakes its way around to where the ammunition is. There's no details here, there's no attempt to really tell a story about this area. Really, this just exists, I suspect, because when they were pushing all these buildings and blocks together, this was the space in the middle, and so they just kind of decided, well, we'll put a grey texture over it and have